No, it's not worth it. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari. In Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Jamuna Tiravanachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Pad Paramahansa Parudikacharya Ashtotar to the Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parudikacharya Ashtotar to the Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki Jai, Samaveta Bhaktabinda ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Are you okay? Because the curtains will open at 8:15. Is that okay? That's fine. Good. Okay, okay. Yeah, we have Gita class until then. No. Okay, I always forget the verse. I think it's 3. Let's see. Yeah, okay, let's do 3. Tapas, you there? Guess not. Can you take this mic? You just hold on to it. No, I don't need the mic. Just hold on to it. Maybe we put it, at least put it on a cushion. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay. On this 29th day of March, 2023 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in chapter 14, the three modes of material nature. Text number 3. Yeah, text number 3. Okay. And that's on page 569. 569. Uh-oh. You're not allowed to point the feet. Is that okay? Can you sit on? You can sit on the bench. There's a whole bench there for you. Mama Yonir Mahad Brahma Tasmin Garbham Tadamyaham Sambhavah Sarvabhutanam Tato Bhavati Bharata Mama Yonir Mahad Brahma Tasmin Garbham Dadamyaham Sambhavak Sarvabhutanam Tato Bhavati Bharata Mama Yonir Mahad Brahma Tasmin Garbham Dadamyaham Sambhavak Sarvabhutanam Tato Bhavati Bharata Mama Yonir Mahad Brahma Tasmin Garbham Dadamyaham Sambhavak Sarvabhutanam Tato Bhavati Bharata. Go ahead. Go ahead, Prabhu. Mama Yonir Mahad Brahma Tasmin Garbham Dadamyaham Sambhavak, yeah. Sambhavak Sarvabhutanam Tato Bhavati Bharata. Those are for the drums. Go ahead, Antonella. Mama Yonir Mahad Brahma Tasmin Garbham Dadamyaham Sambhavak Sarvabhutanam Tato Bhavati Bharata. Hey, watch. Can you tell him to? Don't put it back, okay? Thanks. Sorry. Mama Yoni Mahad Brahma Tasmin Garbham Dadamyaham Sambhavak Sarvabhutanam Tato Bhavati Bharata. You want to try, Manaji? You want to try it? You don't have to. Mama Yonir Mahad Brahma Tasmin Garbham Dadamyaham Sambhavak Sarvabhutanam Tato Bhavati Bharata. Prabhu? Mama Yonir Mahad Brahma Tasmin Garbham Dadamyaham Sambhavak Sarvabhutanam Tato Bhavati Bharata. Bhajamana. Mama Yonir Mahad Brahma Tasmin Garbham Dadamyaham Sambhavak Sarvabhutanam Tato Bhavati Bharata. Okay, I'm going to do the synonyms. There's a problem because the kids, there's no way they're going to be able to stay, quiet. It's the last thing in the world he wants to do is hear a Bhagavad Gita class. I'm sorry. You can do it here, or if then in the lobby there. Let's stay. Okay, word by word meanings. Mama, my, yonihi, source of birth, mahat, the total material existence, Brahma, supreme, tasmin, in that, garbham, pregnancy, dadami, create, aham, I, sambhavaha, the possibility, sarvabhutanam, of all living entities, tataha, thereafter, bhavati, becomes, Bharata, O son of Bharat. The total material substance, Krishna speaking to Arjuna, the total material substance called Brahman is the source of birth, and it is that Brahman that I impregnate, making possible the births of all living beings, O son of Bharata. Purport. This is an explanation of the world. Everything that takes place is due to the combination of Kshetra and Kshetragya, the body and the spirit soul. This combination of material nature and the living entity is made possible by the Supreme God Himself. The mahat-tattva is the total cause of the total cosmic manifestation, and that total substance of the material cause, in which there are three modes of nature, is sometimes called Brahman. The Supreme Personality impregnates that total substance, and thus innumerable universes become possible. This total material substance, the mahat-tattva, is described as Brahman in the Vedic literature. Mundak Upanishad 119. Tasmad etat Brahma nama rupam annam chajayate. The Supreme Person impregnates that Brahman with the seeds of the living entities. The 24 elements, beginning from earth, water, fire, and air, are all material energy, and they constitute what is called the Mahat Brahma, or the Great Brahman, the material nature. As explained in the 7th chapter, beyond this there is another superior nature, the living entity. Into material nature, the superior nature is mixed by the will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore all living entities are born of this material nature. The scorpion lays its eggs in piles of rice, and sometimes it is said that the scorpion is born out of rice, but the rice is not the cause of the scorpion. Actually, the eggs were laid by the mother. Similarly, material nature is not the cause of the birth of the living entities. The seed is given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and they only seem to come out as products of material nature. Thus, every living entity, according to his past activities, has a different body, created by this material nature, so that the entity can enjoy or suffer according to his past deeds. The Lord is the cause of all the manifestations of living entities in this material world. Om Jnana Timarandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So, this chapter is called The Three Modes of Material Nature, and it's part of Krishna's explanation of how this world is working. If we are to navigate our position, can you ask him? Speak to them. There's a great illusion that this curtain can block out sound. Just can't. So the first step in this bhakti yoga process that we're practicing is that one has to understand the basics, which is who are we, what is this world that we inhabit, and how did it come to be? The materialistic view is that somehow it arose by chance over many eons of time. The different molecules and atoms came together, and eventually there was the most rudimentary kind of life, and after many more eons it developed into what we have now, complex. But really that doesn't make much sense, because whenever we see anything that shows any kind of complexity or organization, we know that there's a mind behind it, a human mind that's designed it. and sometimes many minds. An airplane, for instance. There's so many modern airplanes. There's so many different things that have to work just properly. There's probably engineers, specialists in the engine, in the aerodynamics, and all these different things. So an intelligent person, life, what is called the living entity, is behind everything that we see that's certainly built. We may think, well, what about the trees? Okay. Well, the trees, or our own bodies, are also analogous to that. In other words, if you think about it, each body, like a human body, for instance, is an extremely complicated machine. It's working all of I remember when I was a kid growing up, I would get the measles, I would get the flu, I would get these things, And my mother would always come out with a thermometer, and it was always, and if it's above 98.6, Tommy, then you have a fever, Well, how is that 98.6? That's like the normal temperature for human beings. I mean, there may be a little variation. But you can imagine all the things that have to go on in the body to keep that regulated. If you run hard, you're going to raise the temperature. Well, and something goes on, the perspiration, there's all kinds of things going on to make this body work. And we take it for granted until we get sick. Something happens, and then, oh, no, go to the doctor to repair it. Just like you go to the repair shop to repair your car. So the point is that even intuitively we can understand that it's very, very likely that there's an intelligence behind all of this complex universe with all of its bodies and all of its planets and everything working. So that's called the argument from design. This is, I remember learning this before I ever heard of Krishna consciousness and studying in high school and college. I wasn't studying theology, but some of the greatest philosophers were religious, St. Thomas Aquinas and so forth, and we studied some of that. And that was one of the proofs he had for the existence of God. The argument from design, it's called. Prabhupada used it all the time. So in the Bhagavad Gita, this is that God himself speaking. That's what Bhagavad Gita means. The song of God, Bhagavan. And he's describing here a very important aspect of this material nature, and that is called these modes of nature. And we're familiar with them, but not by that name. It's like if someone is a real go-getter, meaning that he graduates from high school near the top of his class, he's smart, gets into MIT, say, and then he's not very religious, but he's in the United States where you can make money, you can enjoy, and there's all this opportunity. So he gets out of MIT and he goes to Wall Street, and he's ready to become an intern practically, hardly any pay at all, so he can learn the ropes, And then if he's successful, maybe he'll start at $100,000 a year. I mean, these guys make so much money. And then he's going. He's a young man, he's enjoying, and he's got a good car, and he's successful in his own mind, So this is like a good expression of the mode of passion, what we call the mode of passion, which means that you're very fixed on sense gratification, but you're not. That to indulge in the senses and waste your time, then you're just going to degrade yourself. You become a drunkard or something. You're not into that. You want to, enjoy things at a higher level, and so you're not a wastrel, and you direct your energies, and you have the brain to learn how to manipulate stocks and do whatever they do to make tons of money. So this is the mode of passion. It'll be described in this chapter. Very common in this age. And then there's a mode of ignorance, which they are never pure. You may be in the mode of passion, but then you'll fall into the mode of ignorance, and then you'll think, what am I doing? And you'll read a book on philosophy, you'll go into the mode of goodness a little bit, But the mode of ignorance is characterized by laziness, procrastination, intoxication. We may know people like that. We may have had some bouts of that ourselves in our lives. And it's very self-destructive for human life. And you usually do damage to yourself. You find yourself, I got this disease now, and my brain isn't working right. So that's a very, very dangerous mode. The mode of goodness is characterized by a lot of thoughtfulness, desiring to reflect on the meaning of life, even becoming a vegetarian. I became a vegetarian. I was a total atheist, just because of the health aspects and the balance and the whole thing, So those are some of the characteristics that we'll learn about these. And these modes of nature, everyone is conducted by them. Every living entity is in a body that has one of those modes as predominant. Like these plants and trees, it's the mode of ignorance. Their consciousness is there, but it's very rudimentary, But you come up, to animals and birds and things like that. They have a bigger brain, they have more intelligence, and they can move and so forth. But still, they can't reason, they can't understand any of this. It's all automatic. When you get to the human form of life, that's where you have a choice. If you come in contact with the proper knowledge and the proper person, you can move up the modes. You can decide, no, I don't want to be controlled anymore by this mode of passion and ignorance. I can see how harmful it is. And I can see the value of the mode of goodness. And then the knowledge that's being presented here is training us how to transcend the modes, how to actually come to the mode of pure goodness, in which knowledge really expands. So here, understanding how the world comes about, this is what Krishna is describing, the mahat-tattva, which is almost like, I give the example of you go in the kitchen, of course, assuming it's been cleaned up very nicely. Everything is in its place. All the spices are there. If you go in there, you're seeing all the ingredients. I always make sure they're covered over nicely. So it's there, but nothing's happening. They're not there's nothing being cooked there. All the ingredients are there, but there's no living entity who's directing it and using intelligence and creating the feast. So tomorrow night, we'll be cooking all day because it's a fast. We'll have different preparations. So somebody took those ingredients and turned them into a nice offering for Krishna and Prasadam. So that's the idea, is that mahat-tattva, all the ingredients are there, but nothing's happening until Krishna injects that, he looks by Mahavishnu, all the living entities who are in the state of suspended animation within Mahavishnu since the last annihilation. If we don't go back to Godhead, what happens when all the planets get destroyed and everything? We stay within the body of Mahavishnu. We're not conscious, but all our karma and everything is waiting to manifest again. And then he expands into a little illustration of it. The universe has come out of his body. He's breathing them out. He expands into another form, Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. And in each universe, there's water manifests from Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, and he's sleeping there, and out of his navel, this long stem of a lotus grows, and Brahma appears on the top, and he's the first created being. He lives for an inconceivably long time. In this universe, over 300 trillion years, but he knows he's mortal because his body is made mostly of intelligence, but even then, eventually, he dies. But his job, is to engineer the whole different planetary system, so all these living entities can then take up where they left off, and their karma comes out, and gradually we manifest and get another chance. So Krishna's explaining this in a few words. And in the next verse, he'll say that he is the father of all. And we are all his children. And the important thing there is that he never forgets that relationship. And so he makes arrangements again and again for us to become enlightened and come out of this, really a prison house. Durga means a prison house or reformatory. It's not just a prison house where, they throw you in there and forget you. No, he's interested in, us becoming enlightened again. So that will all come out in this chapter. But mostly it's going to be a nice description of the different modes and their symptoms and eventually how to transcend the modes. Because we're transcending the modes is what Krishna consciousness is all about. Okay, any questions on this verse? The basic principle of how the universe comes to be. And now, this very important verse, Krishna claims to be the seed-giving father of everyone. Text 4. Sarvayo nishakanteya murtayak sambhavantiyaha murtayak sambhavantiyaha Tasam Brahma Mahadyonya Aham Bija Pradakpita. It should be understood that all species of life, O son of Kunti, are made possible by birth in this material nature, and that I am the seed-giving Father. Purport. In this verse, it is clearly explained that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the original Father of all living entities. The living entities are combinations of the material nature and the spiritual nature. Such living entities, are seen not only on this planet, but on every planet, even on the highest, where Brahma is situated. Everywhere there are living entities. Within the earth there are living entities, even within water and within fire. All these appearances are due to the mother, material nature, and Krishna's seed-giving process. The purport is that the material world is impregnated with living entities who come out in various forms at the time of creation, according to their past deeds. So what's significant here for us personally is that Krishna says he is the bija pradakpata, he's the seed-giving father of all of us. And in the 5th chapter, if you may recall at the end, he claims Suridam Sarvabhutanam, that I am the well-wishing friend of every living being. He's our Father. We've forgotten him, but he never forgets us. Remember, he accompanies us, as we learned in the previous chapter, as a super soul, constantly. And he's trying to give us good instruction. Prabhupada mentioned that this is the voice of conscience that we sometimes feel. You know, if you're trained in what is right and wrong, then you have some hesitation in terms of, I shouldn't do that. Just on the basis, it's the wrong thing to do. And this idea of empathy for other living beings, even subhuman, animals and things, what to speak of human beings, is also a voice of the super soul. Is that we have a kinship because we're brothers, right? We have the original Father, brothers, sisters. You don't understand what I mean. And the super soul, but we can't hear him very distinctly. So for those who are inquisitive about these kinds of matters, he comes externally, as the guru, the acharyas, sadhus, and as the books like Bhagavad Gita. Krishna is speaking to us here. These are the words of Krishna, And when we accept the principle of the absolute nature of Krishna, which is inconceivable, admittedly, but it's true, and that is everything directly related to Krishna is Krishna and has that potency. Especially and most importantly, his name. The name of Krishna is abhinnatvam nama namino. Binna means separated. Abhinna means not separated. So what does that mean? It means that we can associate with Krishna, get the benefit, the purification, the Shakti, by chanting his name with attention, especially with reverence, with devotion. But even without any of that, if we just hear the sound, it's purifying. So that holds for this Bhagavad Gita also. Srila Prabhupada took great pains. You find many Gitas. I mean, I've been reading the Bhagavad Gita before I even heard of ISKCON, back in 71 or 70, And it's very rare. I don't mean to put in the original Devanagari, which has its own potency, even if you can't read it. We have our softback, which doesn't have that for the sake of making it less expensive. But even without that, you can still pronounce it because we always put in the transliteration and the synonyms and the translation, and then Prabhupada's invaluable purports. So the idea is this Bhagavad Gita was put forth and produced by Srila Prabhupada with the idea of helping us. It's not just some philosophical treatise or what to speak of for some material gain, obviously. But the whole idea is that to worship the words of Krishna by presenting them in such a way that they can be taken up by the reader and heard by the reader and have a changing effect, transformative effect. So, with that in mind, with the understanding that Krishna is Suridam. Prabhupada described what does this word Suridam mean. Just like in English, we have different words. You have your bosom buddy. Your best friend, right? That's the best friend. And then there's so many other friends who aren't so intimate with you. Then there's acquaintances you may know. So in Sanskrit, you also have that kind of thing. You have bandhu, who's like a regular friend. Sakha, maybe a little more intimate. But the Surit is a friend who's always has your welfare at heart. Where do you find a human friend like that? I like to give the example. You show up at your friend's apartment, and okay, yeah, you can stay here a few days. He have an extra cot, put it in the living room like that. But then, if a few days turns into a week and it starts moving toward a month, eventually, Prabhu, it's not going to work. In other words, there's a limit on material friendship, but there's no limit on Krishna's friendship. Surit means always, always having our best welfare at heart. He stays with us through all the bodies, even the ants, the dogs and cats. The Super Soul always there. He knows, this in this form he can't really find me, but I'm going to stay and guide them so they can go through and then come up. But then in the human form, we can actually contact that Super Soul most readily through the external means, but even eventually coming to get direct inspiration. There's a wonderful purport at the end of the second chapter, second canto, I believe, that it's almost unique in all of Prabhupada's books. And it's a verse that describes, one can, he doesn't use this word intuit, but that's what the meaning. One can intuit the existence of the Super Soul by some use of the intelligence. And he goes through the whole point about how when you lose your car keys or something, what do you do? Try to recall, when did I just see them last, right? And you may, be a little desperate, you go here, you go there. So it's almost like a prayer, and then if you finally remember, that's, oh yeah, I put them, behind this, book, and you find them. You don't really realize it, but with the guidance of this purport, you realize it's almost like it's almost a prayer, inchoate prayer to the Super Soul, to the higher intelligence to guide you. And when your intelligence is purified, it becomes the guidance for your mind and senses. That intelligence has been, probably the famous word, Krishnized. The editors made it into Krishnized, but I never did that. Krishnized. Prabhupada always said Krishnized, which is, anyway. Krishnized. No, not the eyes. Baptized, So the whole point is that your intelligence has been saturated and infused with this knowledge. And so you're understanding, okay, I should get up early and leave some time every day for meditating on Krishna and chanting the holy name. And if you do that, then you get more direct inspiration, you directly contact. And especially Prabhupada wanted us to study his books, like these classes. Before there was anything practically of ISKCON, there were the classes. It started with Prabhupada, Kirtan and Prasadam and Bhagavad Gita class. That was what he started with in 22nd Avenue. So knowing that Krishna is our Father, our eternal Father of everyone, and that He's our best well-wisher, then we're inspired to serve and build on that relationship. And basically, Father, means that He's the master with the servant, and He's the well-wisher. So this is an important verse to understand that every living entity has a relationship with the Supreme Father. We are all brothers and sisters, and Prabhupada always extend this to the animals, especially the cows. This is why the first thing you learn, practically walk into the temple, no meat eating, we're vegetarian, we offer. Because it's a sense of empathy. I've been a vegetarian longer than I've been a devotee. I was like a whole year and a half before I even met the devotees, and I was eating raw food and everything. And part of it, I must say it was mostly for health, but then I saw how it's also such an ethical thing. Even if you don't believe in God, why, if you don't need to eat meat and keep these slaughterhouses open? There's a law. Because people would go in and they would take pictures of the slaughterhouse. It's so horrible that millions of people, or thousands of people would give up meat. So now they got a law passed, the big slaughterhouse companies, that you can't do that, In other words, they know that is bad press, So why, it's such a obvious thing to do, that it's not necessary. It's not necessary to live at all. In fact, they've proved that it's one of the biggest factors in global warming. Is millions and millions of cows and pigs and everything being slaughtered, and it creates so much pollution, and the cows produce methane and the whole thing. So that's another thing. And it extends to every living being. Prabhupada says in his charming way, a devotee, I just heard him on the tape, devotee would hesitate even to kill a mosquito. What to speak of, cows. So a lot of it, comes from this truth. Aham bija pradakpita. I am the seed-giving father of every living entity. Which is great. It means that we're all kin, really. We're all God brothers.
Sometimes, don't they say, you give them the mukti by, getting them out of that mosquito state? The mosquito, then
I don't know.
You let them go of that,
Well, it's another factor. Not that you're giving them liberation, because then you can go around killing as many. No. But if someone attacks you, it's in the Mahabharata, with a deadly weapon, whether a knife, a spear, or their little proboscis, whatever they got, then you can kill. And there's a pastime, Prabhupada's in India. There's tons of mosquitoes sometimes in the hot season, as you may know. And his servant was asking him, because it was bothering Prabhupada, can we kill them? And said yes, because they're attacking. So he was very happily, was self-defense is one. That's another thing. But yeah, while you do it, chant Hare Krishna. Yeah.
Could you repeat the word, for the best friend, what was the word?
Suhrit. Yeah, rit is heart, and su means, is always in your heart.
Thank you.
All right, let's go on if there's no more discussion. Text 5. Sattvam rajas tamahiti. But text 5, top of 571. Guna prakriti sambhavaha. Nibadnanti mahabaho. Dehe dehinam abhyam. Material nature consists of 3 modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. When the eternal living entity comes in contact with nature, O mighty armed Arjuna, he becomes conditioned by these modes. Purport. The living entity, because he is transcendental, has nothing to do with this material nature. Still, because he has become conditioned by the material world, he is acting under the spell of the 3 modes of material nature. Because living entities have different kinds of bodies in terms of the different aspects of nature, they are induced to act according to that nature. This is the cause of the varieties of happiness and distress. So we've already heard of these modes, but they hasn't gone into great detail. You may recall in chapter 7, text 14, he's talking about how we're bound up by these modes, and the only way to get out is to surrender to him. Daivi yesha gunamahi, text 14.
Could you just repeat the last sentence?
Yes, that we're bound up by these modes, and the only way to get out is to surrender to Krishna. That's the subject of this verse, text 14, very important verse, 7:14. He says, Daivi yesha gunamayi, mama maya duratyaya, mameviye papadyante, mayametang tarantite. So taranti means to cross over, be delivered from. So this material energy is binding us with these modes of nature, and it's a spell. The spell is that this is all there is. That this is what life is all about. Is that the material world, and try to stay safe, try to enjoy and get this object, and after some time you die, and that's the end of it. But that's wrong. We never die. The soul never dies. We're conditioned by this body. We forget. We forget our previous life. We forget about a lot of our present life too. As you get older, right? There's a few things that stand out, but there's a lot of fog back there. But ultimately, the whole thing goes, and you get a new brain, you get a new body, maybe human, maybe not. And the previous life is just like a dream. Just like at night we dream, and maybe we have another experience, maybe another identity, some adventure, or a nightmare. And then you wake up and, oh, thank God it was a nightmare, now I'm glad I'm awake. Or it was such a nice dream, boy, I wish I could go back to sleep, I didn't have to go to work, I really like that dream. But whatever it is, it's just a dream. But this is also a dream. This is your daydream and you have your night dream. It seems much more real, but it's no more real because it's temporary. It's also passing away at every moment. So what this verse says is, Daivi Yesha Gunamayi. These three modes are, this nature is divine because it's connected to me. Just like we're learning, Krishna is in charge of creating this material world with its modes. So in that sense, it's divine. Mama Maya, it's my Maya, composedly. Duratyaya, impossible to cross over on your own. You may say, yeah, well, I mean, everyone is trying to counteract the dangers of the material world, but they fail. It's too strong. So, mama duratyaya, but ma maybe ye papadyante. But those who surrender unto me can cross beyond it. Because Krishna, he lifts us out of this material world. Our consciousness doesn't need to be conditioned. We're only conditioned in this material world because we wanted it. We wanted a place where we could try to imitate being Krishna. But that's impossible. We can't be Krishna. So we get this material world where we can try to dominate and try to enjoy and but we end up being slaves of the material world. Just like it's so obvious with drugs, right? You take a drug. Nobody takes a drug because I really want to be addicted, so I become a slave to, no. He said, I want to enjoy, or I want to relax, or I want to do this, So you take something to transform your consciousness. But think about it. After some time, you become impelled by that. You can't give it up. It's taken hold of your brain and your senses, So that's a metaphor for our whole addiction to the material world. We may not be actually addicted to some substance, but we are addicted to the idea of sense gratification and domination of this material world. And that's a self-defeating addiction. Addiction is just a strong word for attachment. You see, you're attached to something that's unwholesome for you. That's a great danger. So this whole world is unwholesome for the soul. It provides all of these different ways that we can try to enjoy, and aspirations and fears and hopes and things. But ultimately we're defeated by time. You have to leave the body. And if we haven't developed any consciousness of Krishna, then we're going to probably lose this human body, especially in this age. So Krishna is giving us systematically how to understanding where we stand and what the modes of nature are, and then ultimately how to transcend them. The body, the chapter ends with that. So now he's going to go into a detailed description of the different modes. Sattvam rajas tamahiti. Isn't that? We did that one already. I'm sorry. Yeah. Number 6, I'm sorry. Tattva sattvam nirmalatvat. Prakashaka manamayam. Sukasangena budnati. Jnana sangena chanaga. O sinless one, the mode of goodness, being purer than the others, is illuminating, and it frees one from all sinful reactions. Those situated in that mode become conditioned by a sense of happiness and knowledge. Purport. The living entities conditioned by material nature are of various types. One is happy, another is very active, and another is helpless. All these types of psychological manifestations are causes of the entity's conditioned status in nature. How they are differently conditioned is explained in this section of the Bhagavad Gita. The mode of goodness is first considered. The effect of developing the mode of goodness in the material world is that one becomes wiser than those otherwise conditioned. A man or person in the mode of goodness is not so much affected by material miseries, and he has a sense of advancement in material knowledge. The representative type is the Brahman, who is supposed to be situated in the mode of goodness. This sense of happiness is due to understanding that in the mode of goodness, one is more or less free from sinful reactions. Actually, in the Vedic literature, it is said that the mode of goodness means greater knowledge and a greater sense of happiness. The difficulty here is that when a living entity is situated in the mode of goodness, he becomes conditioned to feel that he is advanced in knowledge and is better than others. In this way, he becomes conditioned. The best examples are the scientist and the philosopher. Each is very proud of his knowledge, and because they generally improve their living conditions, they feel a sort of material happiness. This sense of advanced happiness in conditioned life makes them bound by the mode of goodness of material nature. As such, they are attracted toward working in the mode of goodness. And as long as they have an attraction for working in that way, they have to take some type of body in the modes of nature. Thus there is no likelihood of liberation or of being transferred to the spiritual world. Repeatedly one may become a philosopher, a scientist, or a poet, and repeatedly become entangled in the same disadvantages of birth and death. But due to the illusion of the material energy, one thinks that this sort of life is pleasant. And Krishna will make it clear in a few verses, which we may not have time to read tonight, that you never find these modes purely. If someone is in the mode of goodness, it means that predominates, but they'll also have some things that in the mode of passion, and they may fall and be affected by the mode of ignorance also. It's very complicated, yeah.
Hare Krishna. So it's clear why we need to transcend the mode of ignorance. It's clear why we need to transcend the mode of passion. But also the mode of goodness, well, what says here. But also it's maybe because goodness is something so relative, like let's say I want to feed all the homeless people because I'm thinking I'm doing so great. And then someone else could say, well, you're feeding these beggars and they'll never go to work. So you're actually enabling them, right? So I'm thinking I'm doing so great. Really out of my heart, I want to feed these people because they need. But then actually, maybe it's true. I'm not really helping them to get a job. So maybe I should helping them to maybe get a little education, find a job, or helping them, So maybe that's the reason why we need to transcend the mode of goodness, because it's not, in this material world, nothing is really good. There's always a point of bad.
The mode of good, it's relative. The mode of goodness is good because you're more likely in the mode of goodness, if you meet a devotee, you come in contact with the book, that you'll be more interested in it, because you're more thoughtful. You're not as entangled in gross sense gratification, and all of that. So you often find that people who become vegetarians, they're more likely, they say, oh yeah, I go to Hare Krishna, they have a vegetarian feast, that's good, And then they'll come in contact and they'll be more likely to take it up. There's even a verse, what is that? Nivritta tarsha rupagiyamanam babaushada chotamano biramad. Kautama shloka gunanavadat pumam rajeta vinapashugnat. This is spoken by Pariksit Maharaj in the very beginning of the 10th canto. He's heard all the 9 cantos before leading up to it. And now now comes the real essence of the Bhagavatam, which is the 10th canto, the pastimes of Krishna. And so he says, and this verse describes the value of hearing that. Nivritta tarshaya, when it's especially spoken by someone who is free of material desire. In other words, the Prabhupada, had experience in India of professional Bhagavatam readers. They always go to the 10th canto and they always go to the rasa dance because that's what's most commercial. They'll be able to get a bigger audience, So the real motive is to become famous and make money. It's not to really enlighten. Otherwise, you can't just skip to the 10th canto. So, but someone who's Nivritta Tarshaya, who really wants to enlighten, then he'll start from canto 1, as Prabhupada did. So when one hears the Bhagavatam from a real pure devotee, it's very powerful medicine to cure the disease of birth and death. Bhavaushadi. And it's not a bitter medicine, it's delightful for the ear and the mind. You hear the Bhagavatam verses. I was going to, I don't have time, I might share a couple of those verses from the 10th canto. Who would give up hearing the glories of Uttama Shloka? Uttama Shloka is a name for Krishna, means he who is glorified in the best of poetry. Who would give it up? Except someone who is a pashugna, which has 2 meanings, a meat eater, or who's committing spiritual suicide, an impersonalist. Pashugna means. So in other words, it's very difficult if someone is so oblivious that he's a gross meat eater, and that has an effect on the body, has an effect on the consciousness. That person is unlikely to become attracted, to Krishna consciousness. But he may, because he comes in contact. But the point is that the mode of goodness, you're open to it. You're open to such philosophy. So like you take this brahmacharya ashram. That's one of the things that they cultivate. Regularity, cleanliness, and so forth, which is all a mode of goodness. And it helps because then you're much more in tune with the mode of pure goodness and spirituality. It's just the way it works. So the mode, but as explained here, you're conditioned by the happiness that you find. If it's just material goodness, then, you'd be a philosopher, you like to listen to classical music, you're a vegetarian, but that's not transcendental. You can easily lose that and come back down into the mode of passion and ignorance.
So is it, so of the three modes?
We should try to do it in the, we have an audience out there.
Check. Okay. So of the three modes, it's beneficial for us to be in goodness mode most of the time. Is that?
Well, yeah. The thing is that Krishna consciousness, the bhakti will, if you follow carefully, you'll automatically be in the mode of goodness. And if you're just coming to Krishna consciousness, then being in the mode of goodness will mean that you're more enthusiastic to follow the principles. It's because the Krishna consciousness is pure goodness.
So this mode is more beneficial than the other modes.
Yes, definitely. The other modes can completely block, your interest. You're not interested anymore. I don't have time.
But as a human, we do transform to those modes and then switch back and forth.
In this age, especially, the modes of passion and ignorance are very prominent.
Okay.
And so it's a dangerous, age. And that's why the chanting is so important, because immediately if you get into the chanting, it lifts you up out of the modes. And then you're more likely to stay in mode of goodness, So it's like that.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. We have a few minutes, and I'd like to leave a little time for a little poetry. I was kind of rehearsing. Let's see if I remember what I was doing. So, okay. So this is a poem based on the beginning of chapter 21 of the 10th canto, which is the famous Venu Gita. So in Sanskrit is very beautiful. There's just 2 verses. It goes like this. Kusameptabanadada shushme bringa vijakula gushta saraksarin mahidram manupata magaya charayam gasaha pasupala balashtaku javenam barhapidam natavadavapu karnayo karnikaram bimhran vasak kanakakapisham vaijayanting chamalam randran veno hadadasudeya purdayan gopa vrinda vrindaranyam swapadanamanam bravishad gita kirtihi. Vrindavan's rivers, lakes, and hills ring out with charming hums and trills as flocks of birds and maddened bees rejoice among the flowering trees. To those idyllic woods and glens repairs Govinda with his friends, Sri Rama and the cowherd boys, to taste the most exquisite joys. And as they walk along the way, absorbed in herding and in play, Sri Krishna, beauty absolute, begins to blow his mystic flute. With peacock plume upon his head and fragrant flower on each ear, he enters Braja's wood with tread sublime, a dancer without peer. His golden yellow raiment glows, his garland reaches to his knees, and from his lips the nectar flows and fills his flute with melodies. As Krishna thus begins his day with friends who sing his glory sweet, he beautifies the forest way with fine impressions of his feet. Samadhi culminates in this, to always see this scene of bliss within oneself and outside too. May Krishna give this boon to you. That last verse is from Prabhupada's Krishna book. He says this is the highest kind of transcendental meditation, is to meditate on Krishna entering the forest with his friends. So I thought I'd share that with you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So now we'll adjourn for kirtan and arti and beautiful darshan, the deities. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol.